Welcome to the Irish Stew podcast. I'm Martin Nutty.
And I'm John Lee. For the second year running, Irish Stew is the podcast in residence at the Capital Irish Film Festival in Metro Washington, D.C. 4 days at the AFI Silver Theater in Silver Spring, Maryland.
And a big thank you to Solas Nua, and in particular to Maeve McCullough, director of the Capital Irish Film Festival, for the invitation to return. Maeve and her team made this episode possible.
And in this episode, we bring you conversations around three films: Saipan, Báite, and Conveyance.
And for Saipan, John sat down with directors Glenn Leyburn and Lisa Barros D'Sa on opening night. And we'll also hear from Dan Mahoney, giving us the view from the audience.
The following day, I caught up with Eleanor O'Brien, lead actor of Báite, the Irish-language feature film shot in Connemara that went on to win the Capital Irish Film Festival Audience Award for Fan Favorite Irish Feature Film.
And on the final day, I sat down with Gemma Cray, associate editor of Film Ireland, who is also screening her short film, Conveyance. Gemma has a deep understanding of the Irish film ecosystem and gives us the broader context behind everything we witnessed at this festival.
3 films, 5 voices. Let's get into it.
We begin on opening night, right after the first Washington, D.C. screening of Saipan. John caught up with Lisa Barros D'Sa, co-director of the film, alongside with her husband and filmmaking partner, Glenn Leyburn. The audience reaction was still ringing in the air, and Lisa had a very special guest alongside her.
So I wanted to ask, you're playing this now before an American audience. What was the reaction like? Did we laugh in the right places? And
you guys laughed at all the right places. I was really excited about that. The film is coming out in the States, in the theaters in a couple of weeks. So watching it with an American audience was just a really great opportunity to do that. It was just wonderful hearing the laughter and the moments where it goes quiet. I was really pleased.
And I, as an American with a lot of Irish connections, but I was never aware of this story whatsoever, and I was completely involved with it.
That's great to hear, because I came to it. My co-director Glenn and I didn't know the story before I read the script. He knew it in a huge amount of detail. So I always feel like I was making it a little bit for the people like me who didn't know it, but I wanted to fascinate them with the same elements of the story that really drew me in when I first came across it.
And the players who are still around, who were in that time, have they seen it, and what have their reactions been?
Some of them have seen it. A few of them have commented on it. Kevin Kilban commented on it, and I think the general idea was that he really enjoyed the film as a film, but he had some things to say about things that were not quite as he remembered them, which is absolutely fine. And I think we always said we weren't making a documentary. We were making a drama. We certainly did a deep dive into all of the research, all of the archive material, but ultimately it was a drama. So it's not documentary what they will all remember, but it is worth saying. I read a lot of different biographies. I think I read 6 biographies of people who were on the team. And even then, when they wrote about it, all the accounts were quite different. So I guess it's a story about the fallibility of memory and storytelling and narrative anyway. And I don't know what it's like to have a film made about different aspects of my life. I'm sure it's very difficult in a lot of ways. So it's generous of them to even watch it. And whatever their opinion is, they're perfectly entitled to it. As Roy said, football is all about opinions, and they're very much entitled to theirs.
One more question before I let you go back and have a good time. As a filmmaking question, you both were directors on the film. How does that work?
Yes, Glenn and I, we're married. We've directed together on a number of occasions, a few feature films now. It really works. The most important thing is to agree on the voice of the film and what the tone is. And we really have a lot of the same tastes. So once we lock that in, we know the film that we want to make. And then on set, I work a bit more with the actors. Glenn works a bit more with camera. That's the kind of backgrounds we both came from. And it's great. People have question marks before they come and set with us, but hopefully people have a good time. And it's great because we can then spend more time with the actors, spend more time with camera, and we try not to argue on set. We save that for, not that we ever argue. I'm standing here with my daughter and she's looking at me and saying, you guys don't argue, do you? But yeah, so that's really how it works. But it all comes together. Yeah. It's all part of the same organism, so it's all got to work together as a whole.
And could you introduce me to your co-star here?
Yeah, I have one of the stars of the film, my daughter Sylvie Leyburn, standing beside me.
How is it working with these directors?
Okay.
Okay. Are they better parents or better directors?
Both.
It's a safe answer.
Next, John speaks with Glenn Leyburn, Lisa's co-director and the other half of one of Irish cinema's most distinctive creative partnerships. Glenn takes us deeper into the heart of the film. Two men, two visions of Ireland, and a moment in football history that still divides families to this day.
So let me ask, what do you feel was the most challenging or the most difficult part of telling this story for you?
I guess you're dealing with real people. And that's always a challenge. You're dealing with what has become a huge cultural moment in Ireland. It still has repercussions in Irish society, still divides families, and you want to tell that story in a balanced way. I certainly feel that we wanted to balance that story, and you want to show both sides of that story and show both men as three-dimensional human beings. And the more we researched it, the more we realized how much they wanted the best for their country and the team, but just had different ways of going about that.
Yeah, I'm an American. I was unaware of the story, and I was totally engrossed, and I also felt shifting loyalties between the two men.
That's probably good. I suppose as a storyteller, you want that. Again, it wouldn't be a great story if it was just one side. I think drama is built from having those shifts, having conflict, and then having shifts within that.
For an Irish film, you ended up in a very exotic location. Was that actually Saipan, or did you?
No. For 1 week in pre-production, we thought we might actually go to Saipan. I don't know if you know where Saipan is. It's right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We were researching the hotel that the Irish team stayed in, and we realized that it had just closed down, so it was lying empty. And we thought, wouldn't it be a great idea if we just used that as a studio and we would all fly in, and that would be amazing. But then for all the reasons why it was a bad idea for the Irish football team to go to Saipan, we realized it would have been a really bad idea for us to go to Saipan. So luckily, or maybe unluckily, we didn't go to Saipan. A lot of the film is actually shot at Belfast and in Carlingford and in Dublin. We were lucky to get some sunny days, and that's not always a given there. We also went to one of the Canary Islands, we went to Tenerife. We were guaranteed some real sunlight there and some palm trees.
I thought I saw some silhouettes of tanks in the water. Was that?
I'm afraid that there were silhouettes of tanks, which in Saipan they do have that. We added those with the CG. Yeah.
How do you feel the American audience reacted?
We generally had really warm reaction. We premiered the film in TIFF. So again, a North American audience that I guess probably didn't know this story and had very warm and engaged reactions. I guess that was one of the other challenges. You want to make a film that speaks to people who know this story very well. You also want it to play to people who have never heard of Roy Keane, who have no interest in football whatsoever. And I think there are ingredients in this story which should be universal, should be entertaining for people, whether you know the story or interested in football or not.
Just one word about your two main actors there. How did their conception of the characters develop during or leading up to the making of the film?
Anna is from Cork. Roy is famously from Cork. He's practically a saint or a god in Cork. And as a taxi driver told us, he is a religion in Cork. Anna grew up with Roy in the background. And so in a way, Roy is in his DNA, so that's a good starting point for an actor. He's also a very brilliant actor and very careful and considered and did lots of really brilliant research. And I also took on really Roy's physicality at the time. At this point in Roy's career, he's a little bit older, but he had also, because I think maybe he's getting a little bit older, he had really concentrated on his physical well-being. So he was very lean and very athletic, and Aina trained quite heavily on the run-up to the film to have that physicality. Steve really identified with Mick because of his own history. And identifying as being Irish and his Irish heritage is incredibly important to him. And actually, he brought a lot to, when we talked about the script, Steve's very good at script because he's obviously Oscar nominated for Philomena as a writer and has written throughout his career. So we really did sit with Paul, the writer, and ourselves, and we talked about all aspects of Mick and his history and his family history and how we would bring that to screen. And yeah, Steve's very engaged and is very brilliant. I said in the Q&A that I think Steve is a genius, and I absolutely stand by that, and I don't bandy that word around lightly.
Tremendous range. I've mostly seen him as in comedy roles. So.
Yeah, and he's absolutely a genius in those. But he really does have a wonderful ability for dramatic roles as well. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that too. We already have seen Steve being brilliant, and yeah, there will be more to come.
One last question. You captured a moment between the past and the future in this film in a lot of ways. Is there any, I know, among viewers, a little sense of maybe embarrassment looking back at some of it in terms of, how the Irish team went into their preparations?
The thing about it is, it wasn't unique at the time for those sort of preparations for the Irish to do that. It was a soccer thing, a football thing. Certainly the English were quite capable of that, Scottish, and lots of other, even European teams. With our 2026 eyes, we look at it and we think, wow, that's incredibly shocking that they're going to a tournament and they all drank alcohol and sat up half the night. That's insane. But of course, it was 20 years ago, and sports science and that type of thinking was only just coming in. Right. Now, in the story as well, Roy was playing for Manchester United at this point, and as I say, he was very aware of getting older and his own physical fitness, and Manchester United were at the cutting edge of sports science, and so his diet would have been very regulated. He wouldn't have been drinking alcohol, but this would be a recent thing, and Manchester United, being a very elite team, embraced this early.
That's really helpful to know.
Yeah, and so it is interesting that on the cusp of that, so actually, and that notion of going and having a drink and bonding before a tournament had worked for many teams and actually worked really well. It worked for Irish teams, worked for English teams. It wasn't anything unusual. What would have been more unusual is probably the sports science stuff at that point. That's why kind of Mick did have a point. Mick's methodology was perfectly acceptable. And Roy was just a bit ahead of his time, really, in many ways.
That puts him more clearly on the vanguard and draws out why they had the conflict.
Yes, exactly. And I guess it's interesting because it's playing out on that methodology, and then it's also playing out on the level of the new Ireland, the old Ireland, the Celtic Tiger, an Ireland that's standing more confidently on the world stage and has a much more sophisticated view of all sorts of things. So it's playing out on different levels, which is one of the reasons why the film really interested us. Often we look at things, as Marie had said in the introduction, hold the light in the dark in one hand. And it's also, for us, very interesting to talk about quite serious themes and wrap them in an entertaining package. In a slightly Trojan horse way, you talk about all sorts of things about identity, national identity, masculinity, perhaps it being funny or entertaining or, yeah.
Thanks so much.
Before we move on from Saipan, John steps outside the filmmaker world and catches up with Dan Mahoney, a festival regular, a passionate Irish football fan, and a man with deep Irish roots who came to the film not as a critic, but as a supporter. Sometimes the most honest reaction to a film comes from the seat in the audience.
What drew you here tonight, and how did you enjoy the film?
I've probably been to this festival 7 or 8 times, and I was really excited to see the film tonight as a pretty big Irish football fan. In fact, I was in Dublin for the semifinal match in 1990, which was a unbelievable experience. I didn't remember the whole story about tonight, but I thought it was a fabulous film.
The story was new to me, and it held me and gripped me, so you don't have to be a Irish football fan to get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything about the film in particular that you really thought nailed it or was successful?
I thought it seemed to capture, and I don't know Roy Keane's whole story, but obviously very different individual that would take that approach. So I'm looking forward to looking into that a little bit more.
Yeah. What else are you going to see in the festival?
We're going to try to see the Daniel O'Connell film. and got a couple others that we got to see what the schedule looks like to get back over there.
And then the discussion shifted to our Irish-American roots.
I'm from Connecticut. My grandparents came over.
So you have me beat by a generation, but I'm 94% Irish. 7 of my 8 great-grandparents either emigrated or were born of Irish parents.
I'd pick you out from across the room.
We are actually spending the month of September in Bantry, which is where most of my people are from. And we're going to be attending the 71st gathering of the O'Mahony Society, which is the longest running clan gathering that's had a gathering in Ireland.
And what's the area that you're going to be?
We're going to be in Bantry, which is West Cork.
Bantry, you've been warned.
We turn now to Báite, the Irish language film that would go on to win the Capital Irish Film Festival Audience Award. John sat down with Eleanor O'Brien, the film's lead actor, in what was her first lead role in a feature film, performed entirely in Irish. What follows is funny, candid, and genuinely inspiring.
What is the correct pronunciation of the film? I speak no Irish.
No problem. It's Báite.
Báite.
Báite, yeah, lovely.
Okay, I wasn't too far off. Yeah. Tell me about, you grew up in Limerick. Is that where you got your start in theater? What was the first theatrical thing you did?
Oh, you're going to love this. So, yeah. So in primary school, which would be your elementary school, we would have a story around Christmas around the Bible and Jesus coming to the inn and all these kind of like biblical stories. But around Easter time, we would do when Jesus was crucified at the cross. This sounds hilarious. And I remember I was in like maybe 5 or 6. And I remember the story is that like the cock crowed three times. That was it. Yeah. And I remember the teacher, I was only like 6 or small, and the teacher said to me, "Do you think you could be like, could you do a cock-a-doodle-doo?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can do that." And didn't even think about it. So I was at the church in the side, and the teacher gave me the little nod, and I was like, "Do these?" But I'm not going to do it now. But I remember everybody laughing in the audience, and I remember being like, "Why are they laughing? I'm just being the animal." So that was the first time I ever...
Well, voiceover work is a lucrative sideline.
Oh, I'd love to get into it. If anybody can hear this, the sultry sound.
It was Irish part of your, I know it's part of the education system, but was it part of your life at that time?
No, to be fair to my mother and father, my grandmother on my father's side, she did her exams through Irish, and she was a primary school teacher, and she would have been very good at Irish. And my dad would have quite a bit of it as well. I have siblings, and I saw my older sister go into the Gaeltacht, which would be a region where you could go to for teenagers during the summer to learn for 3 weeks.
Would that have been Connemara?
Yeah, Connemara. So where we filmed Báite, it was in Connemara again. And I was so excited because like we would have been brought to beaches as teenagers and like little areas that like not everybody know of. And like I was in Kilkieran, and Coláiste Joseph was where I was. And so that's where I had my love of the language born. And like even there, I was talking to Gemma, and she was saying Irish is really cool now. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I always thought it was cool. But to me, I was like, I always thought it was great. So it's lovely.
You were here last night with the U.S. screening. How did the U.S. audience react, in your opinion?
Oh, they were so lovely. They're so kind. Yeah, no, I thought they were brilliant. A lovely audience. And I think they enjoyed it. They tell me they enjoyed it.
It's a 400-seat theater. It was packed. And Irish language subtitles didn't keep anybody away.
No, that's so true. And everybody was, just even after seeing it, everybody's like coming over, and they enjoy it for different reasons. And it's interesting as well, because I was like, I don't know why everybody enjoys it, or different things will speak to different people. Yeah, it's lovely.
It's a good story. It has elements of mystery which keep people along. It has family drama, and there's a little romance out there on the horizon.
So true. Yeah, no, I think it's a great story. Sheena did a brilliant job. And I think I was only saying somebody because I came from the perspective of, I play Peggy, who is the kind of lead protagonist. But because of being an actor and because of the way I work, I was very much focused on her, what she needed, what she wanted to get out of it. So it's only now that I'm seeing the fuller story of it. Yeah. So now I'm getting to appreciate all of it in its glory, whereas before I would have been like, no, got to think of Peggy. What's Peggy need? What's Peggy want? Peggy don't know about those other things. She don't even know. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing I always forget, is these things are shot out of sequence frequently.
Yeah.
So these developments in your character, you can't reveal them. No. Until it's the right time.
Yeah, that's so true. And even when I was doing the audition, they gave me the full script to read, and the scenes were like, there was 2 scenes And then there was the end of the whole script, and I didn't read it because I didn't want to know what happened, because I was like, I don't think my character needs to know. And I think that really helps me in the audition, because if you see the film, there's stuff that's revealed that I was like, my character doesn't need to know about it. And when I met Ruan in the audition, it felt like a risky move at the time, but somebody was like, no, you had intention behind it. Your character didn't need to know. And also, because it was shot out of sequence where I was staying in Connemara in the hotel, I had, if you've seen A Beautiful Mind, the movie, when he has like all the pages up on the wall, I had the whole script pasted on the backboard of my hotel room, so I could see from start to finish where we were in the story, because I'm very visual and I need that kind of help. So I did that for the whole process, which I loved. But I looked probably crazy. If anybody came into my hotel room, they were like, what is happening?
That sounds like one of those crime scene investigations where they put everything on.
Very much.
And just give us a sense. I think you might be a couple of years younger than I am. I'm not sure, but I get the sense this is quite a breakthrough moment in your career.
Yeah, it was my first feature film where I was the lead, and it was challenging for that reason, and also the reason of the Irish in it, because I wouldn't be, by no means am I a native speaker, and anybody who's a native speaker, I'm so jealous. I'm always like, oh, I would have loved to have just had that ground. Whereas I think now it's lovely that I get to work for my Irish, though. I get to really get to know it. But yeah, it was huge, and it was an experience that I think also when I was doing it, I was like saying to myself, do I like this? Can I get on board with this? And I was like, yeah, I think I can. And like even the set and being a lead in it, I was like, no, I think this suits me.
Well,
it's nice to know.
You have a great ensemble cast. There's terrific actors up and down. Even some of the smaller parts really break through. But the movie does revolve around your character.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, which is, and again, at the time, I didn't tell myself that. I was like, that's a lot of pressure to put on a girl. But no, for sure. And like even, I think after I watched it, somebody turned to me and went, you can carry it. You can carry a feature film, which I was thrilled about. And but the ensemble was great. Thank you so much. Yeah. But I loved watching the actors like Padraig O'Lunchy, he's amazing. Dennis Conway, Mo. There was some of them who I'm going to say has been in the industry longer maybe than others. And it was great watching them, and just even watching them on set, watching them act. And Padraig I thought was great because he was I come from more of a theatre background, and I wouldn't really understand film as much, and I'm still learning about it. But you can't see it in the film, but he's very physical in it. And I remember...
And which character is that?
Sorry, apologies. Is Coleman.
Coleman, another pivotal character.
Yeah, lovely blue eyes. But he'd be very physical in the scenes, and I found that really helpful to me as a character, because again in film, to me, like I'm learning, like it feels quite, can the camera see you, hit your mark, whereas theatre you can be a bit more messy.
Yeah.
And he reminded me of theatre with that physicality, and it grounded me more in certain scenes, which is great.
Looking at, as I mentioned, I just ran into you here, so I didn't have a big interview prep, but I did see, I think your first professional gig was in Belfast. It's just curious because the panel discussion we did at the Capital Irish Film Festival was about Northern Irish film and how it's a creative ecosystem north and south of the border now. Any reflections on being in Belfast?
Oh, yeah, it was great. Oh, it brings that great memory. Sorry, I'm laughing that you brought it up because when you're kind of like, what is he going to say? And I was like, oh my God, no, that's easy. Be bang on there. It was a fabulous, again, it was Irish again, which is, yeah, I don't know if it was ni commis ni something. It was like, we can't pay, we won't pay. And it was this really political theatre, but it was really funny because what happened was, well, it was so funny. So my agent rang me saying, do you want to go up for this job? It's up in Belfast. It's through Irish. You said you'd Irish. And I was like, yeah, sure. And he was like, it's tomorrow. And I was like, okay, sure. He's go on a bus and just go up and do your best. So I hadn't read the full script. And like the full script's Osquelia, obviously. And I remember one of my Leaving Cert teachers, Mrs. Roach, oh, bless her. I remember being like, can you help me translate it, please? And she was like, what are you doing? This is crazy. I'm like, please help me translate it. Because I get parts of it, but I can't get other parts. So I remember, anyway, long story short, somebody had dropped out of the production. I stepped in. They were like, yeah, give it to her. Great, she can have the part. It wasn't that much Irish, the role, but whatever. So the day we went up again, it was starting, 3 days' time. So I was up in Belfast. And I thought it was so funny because basically I hadn't had time to read all of it. I hadn't had time to translate it all. And I remember everybody there was a kind of Squealia, speaking Irish immediately. And I was a bit bit thrown into the deep end, but we'll go with it. And I thought it was so funny because we were talking about, we had this production team come in showing us the set. And they were like, and Eleanor, they were like, you'll be sitting here on the table giving birth. And I was just smiling going, yeah.
How do I give birth in Irish?
But I thought it was so funny because I was like, I have not read that part of the script yet. I haven't been that far. And I remember then we got through the process, read the script. It was very funny. It wasn't that I was giving birth. It was that I was pretending to give birth because I'd robbed food, and it was all this it was a kind of comedy piece. But I said to the director after Breed, she's a beautiful woman, and I said to her, I was like, Breed, I was like, those first few weeks, I had no idea what was going on. And she goes, oh, Eleanor, oh, I knew.
Yeah.
But we were like, she's going to get there. And she believed in me, and it worked out. And we had a great run. Oh my God, and also a hilarious thing that happened. Sorry, I don't know if you have time for this. There was also a character in it that was a Garda, like a policeman. And like, it was, the theatre was like, you got your first part and you got the second part. So it was like in between Act 1 and Act 2, we had a little break of 15 minutes, the interval. And I was playing with the guy's handcuffs and I clipped it onto my hand and I put them on and he looked at me and he went, you're a feckin' idiot. And I was like, what? And I was like, give me the keys. And he was like, I don't have the keys. I was like, that's really funny. And I remember everybody came out. Could it have been opening night maybe?
Sure. Let's make it opening
Let's make
night.
it opening night. And I remember they had an axle grinder at one point which was going to cut through. And I remember I was like, I will do anything to get these off. And whoever owned the theatre came in straight away and was like, you need to stop what you're doing right now. There's going to be a lawsuit.
Okay.
And they were like, and the director was there, Breed, and she was like, you're just going to have to go on with them. And I was like, perfect. Yeah, this is no problem. So I went on with it. We added a line in that we met the guards and I ran away or something like crazy like this. Long story short, they found the key. I had to go to the hospital after to get a tetanus shot because an axe that they were trying to use clipped my... Oh, it was just hilarious. It was just one of those things that you were like... Yeah, so it was a great time. Yeah.
That has to be worked into a movie at some point.
For sure.
The story of your life. You just grabbed your time here. I don't know if you have other things to do, but let me just ask what's next for you.
What's next? So I'm restudying at the moment in Oxford. Yeah, I'm in Oxford School of Drama, so I've gone back to learn more about the craft, which I'm really enjoying. And then there's just a few projects that are more local of people I know and trust. And I'm in the development stage of making a film, which I've never done before. I usually get added on to it, so it's really nice being there at the start and being able to create a character and knowing that the character is with me in mind. So I'm doing, more projects on the way, which is brilliant.
I said that was going to be the end. I'm going to ask you one more thing. Could you just talk to the folks and explain to them why they should see this movie in Irish? In Irish.
I just think hearing another language is magnificent in any country.
No, could you tell me that in Irish?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Caig tú fécant an Scanán seo mar tá sé ionach Scanán le teanga difriúil a clostáil agus just beag sé go híntaach is dramíocht álainn agus just tá scéal loidir an agus tá sé faoin éire agus a bhí ann agus just tá sé híntaach. So just come to see that. That's just me saying come to see the film, that there's lovely scenes in it. It's a magical story, mystery, and just lovely to see a language in a film in a different language.
And what is Irish for handcuffs?
Níl clú agam, I haven't a clue. And I don't want to know.
Our final conversation closes out both the festival and this episode. On the last day of the Capital Irish Film Festival 2026, Martin sat down with Gemma Cray, associate editor of Film Ireland and a filmmaker herself, whose film Conveyance was a highlight of the festival's short films program. Gemma zooms out from the individual films to the bigger picture, the Irish film ecosystem, how it got there, and where it's going. The right note to end on.
Well, the lineup itself is just great. I think there's a real strong mix of drama, comedy, action, documentary, informational projects. Then the shorts programs veers from the dramatic to the hilarious to the experimental. It's a real mixed bag for everything modern. And then something beautiful and thoughtful, a period drama that looks over the past, so Báite and Saipan and No Ordinary Heist and Christie and Celtic Utopia. It's been like the best of Irish films, but a real smorgasbord of things to pick from as well.
So for our listeners, Gemma, can you tell us about Film Ireland and your role there? You're an associate editor, as I understand. Our listenership skews American, unsurprisingly, given where John and I are based. What can we experience if we engage? It's a digital publication, as I understand it.
Yeah, we're on Rotten Tomatoes. We have interviews and coverage of Irish films in print. We have a regular podcast that goes out once a week. It covers not just filmmakers, but also industry speakers, different creatives. We'd have people from VFX. We are very lucky that we're supported by Screen Ireland in some of the projects and events that we run. We might run in-person events. At the end of February, we actually ran our own film festival called Imbolg, and it's a woman horror genre film festival. We had Moss over, who's a New York filmmaker, and I say over, they live in Ireland, so we across the road to present their amazing film Birth Rebirth that did incredibly well on the festival circuit. And we had short films from around the world and speakers and stuff. So we do a little bit of everything in terms of what we do. We also have a podcast, so if people want to go over and have a listen, we've spoken to Phyllis Lloyd. I'm not even going to start listing the Irish filmmakers because we just always listen to them. I think that one of the last ones we had was John Butler, who has a series on RTE called These Sacred Vows. And we have one coming up with the director of Alien Romulus.
So you heard it here. There is a podcast which will prick up the ears of our listeners. I will be sure to actually put a link into Film Ireland so you'll be able to track that down. I want to switch over to your film, Conveyance, which ticks a number of really interesting boxes because you're addressing the most topical issue, probably in Irish politics right now, the housing crisis. But you have managed to turn that into a film which probably ticks two boxes, horror and comedy.
Yeah.
So tell me about this. It's a short film.
And it's a love story, sort of. But it is a young couple, Brian and Suzanne. They've been dating a long time and they've all the pressures of trying to find a home. They go to see some really dilapidated, horrible places and they can't even get a bid in because the most dingiest of spaces just are sold out from under them. And next thing they see this most incredibly gorgeous, spacious apartment in Dunleary overlooking the sea and they underbid and they get it. However, it is not without and maybe undisclosed guest of some kind in the form of a ghost. And yeah, they must decide which is worse, the rental market or living in a haunted house.
And I've actually noticed in the film festival, I can't remember which film, clearly it's a theme that's running through Irish film is actual housing problems, because I certainly saw that in at least one of the other shorts. Again, for our listeners who may not be familiar with the Irish housing situation, this has been a problem now for decades in terms of affordability and cost.
Like over 10 years ago, I went to college in Galway and there were kids staying in these really overpriced Airbnbs because they couldn't get anywhere to stay. The average price of rent in Dublin is between 2.5 and 3 grand. That's an average rent. So that means there are houses that are going for much, much higher. They're changing the legislation to protect renters. But unfortunately, what that means is it's actually all the small landlords who might have one family house or something like that that are renting out, but that belong to their granny or something. They're all selling out at that market because the legislation has changed. And I know 4 people who've been handed their eviction notices because it's the last chance the landlord to get to sell the property before the new legislation comes in. And yeah, there's nowhere to rent. So everyone lives with their mum.
So I think we can probably expect to see a continued exploration of that theme in Irish film. But one thing you just mentioned briefly in passing, your film, Conveyance, is set in Dunleary. And I noticed that you got some funding from Dunleary right down, which surprised me because I wouldn't have thought that a county council was offering film funding. And there's this extraordinary ecosystem, it seems to me, of programs in supporting filmmakers and creatives. Tell me about the financing behind your film.
Yeah, so actually, when you were saying county council, there's a lot of county council funding that's available in the west of Ireland. You'll have Ardán do funding, and that's kind of primarily out of the west of Ireland. No, it's not county council funding, but it's almost regional funding. All the schemes are open to everyone to apply, but with county council funding, not including Dunleary. Dunleary is different. You either have to set it in the location and have it very authentically about that location, or you have to have someone on the creative team that is from that space. So there's Offaly, I know there's Sligo, like there's regional ones all over. Kildare definitely have a Shoregrass Fund. They've made some incredible films. So there's a lot of shorts being made and supported out of Ireland as a result of that, because you've that scheme, you've the Virgin Media Discovers scheme, you have Screen Ireland focus shorts, and they do a number of films per year, and they also promote those films. So I would say we're very well supported, but it's still quite competitive. And Dún Laoghaire are great because it's in conjunction with the National Film School. IADT have a brilliant film program that a lot of the top filmmakers that we see now have gone through the ranks there. So it's probably our top tier film education is through there. I think the Houston School of Film in Galway is very good. And Griffith have a great program as well. But they're really good and supportive. And actually a lot of the schemes, their development schemes as well. When we got that funding, we were assigned Sarah Gunn, who was a script editor. And what was lovely is she took us through some of the development process. They were very supportive, but not overbearing in any way with notes either. Do you know, like you were left to work on your project, and when you submitted it, if they were happy, they accepted it, which I think is lovely as well.
As somebody that lives in America, and I'm long removed from living in Ireland, when I left Ireland in the 1980s, there was barely a film industry. Now it seems to me that the actual amount of film being generated out of Ireland per capita just seems to exceed any other country that I'm aware of. I don't know if that's a flawed impression or not, or do you have any sense of that?
I do. So what happened specifically, there were some big shifts in the 80s in Ireland. You would have had all the big American shows coming over, or big American productions going into the likes of Ardmore and those studios, and they would have been a staple on the industry, and it would have meant a few specialist people would have careers in it, and maybe if someone was like a really good crew member, a grip or something like that, they might train up their kids. But then there was a little healthy ecosystem, there was a little bit more money coming around and a little bit more Indigenous production then in the Celtic Tiger. But Game of Thrones was the game changer. So Game of Thrones came into Northern Ireland, and it was the biggest at the time production that had ever been in Ireland. It was huge. So the amount of crew, the amount of opportunities that came from that show meant the entire industry upscaled. And it meant we had X amount of grips who were professionally qualified on an international level and could have that skill set. We had actors that you could get in your short film. Like I was working on projects and you could have a named actor on Game of Thrones, like from The Night Watch, be in your short film, which helped your film go further. So there was opportunity. Even our VFX industry. One of the Irish producers on Game of Thrones said, we're going to keep this in-house. We're going to try and keep some of the VFX in-house. Actually, animation was one of the areas that we did quite well with. Don Bluth came over to Ireland around that time, probably in the 80s and 90s. And projects like All Dogs Go to Heaven were like half animated here. And then there was a program that was brought in, and it was the spur for organizations like Cartoon Saloon now and Brown Bag Films were all born out of that. And what you'll find is in the Irish animation industries, if anyone has young kids, Apple TV's Otis, Disney Plus's Vampirina, Doc McStuffins, all of that is animated in Ireland by Irish companies. So on some level, we're exporting a lot of creative content, and there's a lot of opportunities. There's opportunities in animation for writers, especially in preschool. I don't have them, but they are there. And yeah, then we also have a really robust crew. So productions then have now consistently been coming over to Ireland. So we've had Foundation Wednesday, but that's one of many projects. So things like Jason Staten's Shelter was shot here. Anniversary, that kind of dystopian political film that came out, that was actually shot in Ireland, doubling from America. I watched it, and it's all actors that I know doing American accents and walking around Trinity for some American campus and things like that. And then there's a lot of like exports, which is probably the most important thing in terms of shows like Bad Sisters. That was Sharon Horgan, probably one of our best exports we have. I'm such a fan of her. Aisling Bay, Chris O'Dowd. They're creating their own work that is selling to an international audience as well. That's really resonating with people. So in terms of what we've been able to produce, it's just been upskilling all the time. And like that, you can come over and you can do your VFX, you can shoot a kind of Hollywood scale production in one of the studios. You can have local actors that are good and that are at that level to support your work, so you don't have to be bringing people over. And it's much, much cheaper to film in Ireland. And you get a tax credit, like a good, hefty tax cut. So you're bringing money in. We know you're going to spend more money here. So it just works out. So you'll find there's things happening now. It's crossing over to factual. So you'll find there's like game shows, and they're bringing over their whole audience of American shows that are passing for American that will be filmed over in Ireland. And as a result of that, there's a really healthy, robust ecosystem. We've always been steps like storytellers. We've always loved to spin a good yarn. We've always loved theatre. So that's probably why there's so much, and there's such great support. So this festival, it's supported by Culture Ireland, it's supported by Screen Ireland, it's supported by Northern Ireland Screen. And I do think there is a healthy all-Ireland attitude in terms of, it was Game of Thrones in Northern Ireland that really lit that fire and took our industry up to the next level. So yeah, and now we have dedicated agencies for upskilling. So let's say it is tough to get accommodation in Dublin, and I won't say that it's probably hard for productions. So there's specific organisations designed to upskill crew in regions. So you'll have the west of Ireland being covered, and there's also extra supports from, say, the west of Ireland. If you wanted to film in the Gaeltacht, there's an organisation called RAP, and you'd actually get an uplift because you're filming out there, because they know it's a little bit harder to get out from the airport. And you probably have to put more crew up if you're staying out there. So there's more money as well that you can find in the budget for that. So I think as a result of that, I'm not saying trickle down economics because that doesn't work, but it does trickle down.
Yeah, it's more skill up, I would say. But we're in day 4 now of Capital Irish Film Festival.
Yeah.
I think this is your first time here. So tell me, how's your experience been here as somebody that's a practitioner of film journalism, but also as a filmmaker? How has it been?
Yeah, so the reason I came is you spoke to Denise Deegan last year. Yeah,
yes.
I listened to that podcast. It was very good, and she's brilliant, and her film, The Incomparable, is incredible. So like her, and then another one of my friends had been over a few times, and they just said, it's the crack. It's like of all of them, this is one of the ones that's the most fun and that you'll really enjoy it. And there's a really good social scene. And they were completely right. It is great fun.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the things about this film festival. I came for the first time last year, and I was struck by A, the quality of the programming, but B, the social activities between films, before films and after films, and just the opportunity to engage with the broader Irish film community, whether it's the audience that are passionate about Irish films or whether it's the actual creatives that sit behind Irish film. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to engage.
It's one of the things that I really enjoyed is, number one, getting to connect with the audience, getting to connect with the other filmmakers. But I think there's also such a robust and healthy and engaged audience. It's really nice because, and I'm always grateful when people screen my film. But you do like when people are engaged and they're watching it and they're fans of film. It makes it that little bit more special. And watching it on that screen in that really beautiful theatre and in such great company, that's very special as well. And it's something that I've really enjoyed. Also, the quality of the sound and screen is exceptionally gorgeous. And the Art Deco cinema, it's so pleasant because there's been 2 gatherings afterwards, and then you get to chat with people and kind of share films that you love with the local DC community, which has been really nice because I engage with Irish film in a specific way. I know all the nuances and what everything means, but it's interesting as well to see what someone else has gotten from it.
So I'd like to say thank you to Gemma Cray for sitting down and giving us a deeper background and understanding of the Irish film ecosystem. We will have in the show notes all the relevant links so you can reach out to Gemma and connect. And it's been a real pleasure spending the last few days with you here in Washington, D.C., and hopefully we get to do it again in the not too distant future.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's great fun. If you're an Irish filmmaker, get your films in. And I would say if you're a fan of film, come along because it's just really lovely space to be in. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Martin, 4 days, 3 films, 5 conversations. What stays with you?
Honestly, where do you start? The program this year was extraordinary. It was a rich mix of features, documentaries, shorts spanning drama, comedy, history, and the Irish language. What you hear in this episode is just a snapshot. It's not the full picture.
Yeah, I agree. The thing about the Capital Irish Film Festival, it's hard to convey until you've been there, is it's not just the films. It's the Q&As with the filmmakers after the screenings. It's the conversations in the lobby between films. It's the impromptu social gatherings that can go on until the wee small hours of the morning. You end up talking to directors, actors, filmmakers, and passionate fans of Irish film all in the same room.
Yeah, for me, attending Capital Irish Film Festival, it's all about the access that really sets it apart. The conversations you've heard in this episode happen because the way things are set up, the conditions, the organization of that whole 4 days. That's rare. And in my view, it's worth celebrating.
And Martin, also worth celebrating our partnership with Irish Central. None of this would reach as many ears without their assistance. It's the essential destination for everything Irish: news, culture, history, film, and sport. Head over to irishcentral.com.
Irish Central will be spreading the word on this episode, as they do with all of the Irish Stew episodes, and we're enormously grateful for that partnership.
And we're also grateful again to Maeve McCullough and the entire Solas team. If you've never been to the Capital Irish Film Festival, don't miss the next one. 2027 is not that far away. You won't regret it.
So, until next time, I'm Martin Nutty.
And I'm John Lee. Slán go fóill.
Irish Stew is produced by John Lee, Martin Nutty, and Bill Schultz. Editing, mixing, and mastering by Martin Nutty. Additional editing by Bill Schultz. Music on Irish Stew was composed and performed by Rosa Nutty, with Donald Bowens on drums, Cathal O'Riordan on bass and synthesizer. For more on Rosa Nutty's music, please visit rosanutty.com.